Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. I am Nanipia Asari, a senior consultant with the Risk Advisory Unit of Deloitte Ghana. In today's webinar, which focuses on future of cyber, connecting cyber maturity to business value and sustainability, we will be finding out how leaders across industry are building long-term value by putting cyber at the heart of their business. This webinar will also provide insights from cyber executives around the world on how to navigate the ever-changing cyber landscape while leading your organization towards new business values. A few housekeeping rules before we start the webinar. The webinar will be recorded and uploaded on the Deloitte YouTube page. Also, for the avoidance of distractions, all microphones have been muted. You can raise your hands to ask a question. Otherwise, you can also make use of the Q&A chat box if you have a question during the webinar. We also invite your comments and your questions also by using the Q&A chat box on our screens, that is below the screen. Also, at the end of the webinar, towards the end of the webinar, a link will be shared so that you can provide feedback on the webinar. This is to help us to improve upon our webinars going forward. Before our main speaker, who is Kofi Ewa, comes in to give his welcome address, we will have a poll on which we'll be expecting your responses. The questions are up now, so you can respond to the poll so that we can get started. Thank you. Okay, so the question on the poll was, how do you rate your organization's current level of cyber maturity? We have 100% participation rate, which is very encouraging. For majority, which is 44%, responded medium. We have the next, which is 38% being high, and then 19% being low. We hope that at the end of this webinar, all these would increase to high because of what we're going to learn on the webinar today. So at this point, I'll hand over to Kofi Ewa to give us his welcome address.
Kofi Ewa is currently the Risk Advisory Partner and Technology, Media and Telecom Industry Leader at Deloitte Ghana, with over 13 years' experience in risk management. He has worked and delivered transformational projects to global and regional clients in financial services, telecom, oil and gas, manufacturing, and public sector. Kofi has both industry and practice experience working as an ex-banker in one of the leading banks in Nigeria and as risk management specialist for two of the global Big Four professional services firms in Nigeria and Ghana. His wealth of practical experience has distinguished him as the go-to person by top industry practitioners on risk management matters.
Okay, so to introduce the speakers on the webinar today, we have Honorable Ursula Owusu, who is the key guest speaker. Stephen Kujo will be standing in for her. We have the Risk Advisory Cyber West Africa leader, who is in the person of Temitope Aladenusi. We have Samresh Ramjeet, who is a cyber director for SA. At this point, I'll hand over to Kofi to continue with the introductions and the welcome address.
Thank you, Nanekia. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome every one of you to this year's Global Future of Cyber Survey Report discussion. This is a service that is run by Deloitte on a yearly basis. The essence of it is to elicit information from practitioners within the cybersecurity field on the importance of cybersecurity to their business. This year's theme, which is that building long-term value by putting cyber at the heart of the business, promises to be an exciting one. May I say that from the survey, we have seen significant importance in terms of the attention given to cyber in the boardroom. Prior to now, we've seen cyber treated as an operational matter, which is usually relegated to an operational conversation at management level. But since 2021, there has been significant attention to cyber-related matters, and it has become part of conversation in the boardroom, and it is part of the heart of the business organizations. So cybersecurity matters is no longer, treated as one of those operational matters, by a strategic conversation that is being had in the boardroom. And we will be discussing this. I know we have able men and women on the panel who will be discussing this matter. We have managers from Deloitte who will be taking us through the report to see the important role of cyber in organization and how matured organizations who have prioritized cybersecurity within the organization have benefited from such a program. I want to thank everyone who have made their time to be part of today's webinar. The Minister of Communication, Madam Esma Akufu, who couldn't make it today, ably represented by Stephen Kujo, who will be giving us the keynote address. We also have Samresh. Samresh is one of our partners from SA. He leads our cybersecurity business. And I must say, Samresh is not new to Ghana. In fact, Samresh is a Ghanaian by adoption. He's used to the Ghanaian market. So Samresh will be giving us he's our guest speaker, and will just take us through some of the trends within the cyberspace. Without much ado, I would like to introduce, hand over to Samresh, for Samresh to take us through some of the key trends within the cybersecurity space. Thank you, everyone. And I would suggest you take down the questions, put down some questions, take notes, have an open mind. And when we get to the Q&A sessions, please ask the questions that you ask, because the professionals we have on here, on a good day, if you are to ask them questions, you'll be paying them in some big dollars. But today you have the opportunity of asking them those questions for free. Thank you and happy deliberation.
Samresh is a director in the Deloitte South African practice, where he leads the cyber risk business across Africa. He is a passionate cybersecurity professional with over 20 years of experience in the sub-Saharan cybersecurity market. His core experience spans deep technical roles through to executive business and people management across market sectors.
Thanks, Kofi. Thanks for that warm welcome. Very honored to be welcomed as a adopted Ghanaian. It's fantastic to be with you again. And as you guys know, I've really enjoyed spending time in Accra. So it's really good to meet with all of you on the call as well, and hope to see you in person locally soon. So without any further ado, I'm just going to switch over to my slides here, and just give you a run through in terms of the state of cyber that we're seeing from a global perspective, but all the way down, to the boardroom and to what clients are doing locally. So hopefully you can see my screen and you can see the slides clearly. So just starting off, cyber remains one of those topical and one of the most important global risks for 2023. This is from an Allianz survey. Allianz is obviously a large insurance organization, and they track these because obviously it impacts their cyber premiums and where they're seeing risk. Interestingly, across Africa, cyber incidents are the great equalizer. Every government, enterprise, and even the citizens are concerned about cyber, and people, as they adopt more digital technologies, more digital ways of work. We've seen a lot of work from anywhere type adoption within enterprises. The cyber risk landscape has been changing and growing. So it's been a cause for concern, and more citizens are actually being affected in their personal lives. So in a way, that is actually driving the need for enterprises and governments to take cybersecurity more seriously as well, because there's a very strong intersection between cyber vulnerability and cyber weaknesses that then turns into avenues for cybercrime, fraud, etc. And the challenge is that the money from cybercrime doesn't just stay, within the attacker's domain. That money gets used for funding all sorts of different sort of activities, ranging from human trafficking, drug dealing, military coups, you name it. Wherever there's some sort of bad actor looking to do bad things, looking for funding, the proceeds of cybercrime are actually kind of supporting that. So it's become also a sort of an ethical imperative for organizations to ensure that their cyber capability is robust and that they are doing what's required in terms of their stakeholders, shareholders, and society at large to make their cyber program more robust and resilient to attacks, right? So cyber incidents absolutely still top of mind, top of the pops once again. Zooming in from a global perspective to a Europe, Middle East, and Africa perspective, we are not unique. We are not isolated. We are very much part of the global cyber attack landscape. And one of the most common patterns of attack is through social engineering, which leads to system intrusion and web application attacks, right? So social engineering remains the #1 attack vector. Many organizations, even when they've got a very robust network capability, a strong technology landscape, they've developed and implemented really good governance capabilities in their organization, still deal with the challenge of users clicking on links or downloading software or installing tools, etc., that they shouldn't. And that social engineering pattern accounts for more than 90% of the breaches. And almost inevitably now we're seeing that leading to sort of ransomware. But we will talk about how that's permutated as well as we go along, right? From an EMEA perspective, external attackers are still actively trying to get into our environments, whereas internal attackers are growing. The challenge, though, is that doesn't tell the full story. External attacks might reach a specific part or a foothold in the network, say in a particular web server or a web application, right? But an internal attacker can live on in your environment for years. They could be conducting fraud, they could be systematically weakening servers and capabilities, they could be harvesting information, selling it on the black market, for years before they detect it, because these are authenticated users with authorization who, it's very difficult to detect. So even though internal threat actors only account for 3% of the actual attacks, the damage that they can inflict, either in a single attack or over a period of time can be immense. It can be very difficult to actually close the loop, especially if IP has been stolen and sold internationally as well. So we're seeing that MIA is definitely, bright green, and the greens are getting brighter as we get more digital and more of our citizens and communities getting connected to the internet and to digital transformation outcomes. And that is actually driving a lot of the cyber insecurity and the cyber attacks as that occurs. From a Ghanaian perspective, it's very, very heartening to see that, this is from an ITU Global Security Survey, that Ghana is actually leading in many instances the rest of Africa in terms of the legal, technical, and organizational maturity and measures to address the cyber risk. I think it's only Mauritius and Tanzania and Ghana who make up the top 3 countries across Africa who actually have a very, very well developed and implemented capability around legal and technical measures, as well as expectation settings for critical sectors of the economy, such as banking, in terms of what the requirement is for cybersecurity. So I think there's a lot to be learned from the Ghana government and from the manner in which the Ghanaian society at large has taken cybersecurity as a very serious and critical, credible risk that needs to be addressed. The challenge, though, is always going to be around capacity. And this is something we're going to talk about a little later as well. Cyber capacity and being able to grow and develop cyber skills to be able to actually implement the requirements at scale in a meaningful time frame is often a challenge. And we couple that with, it's not like most organizations have unlimited budgets. So we are sometimes capital constrained in terms of what we need to do as an organization, which means prioritizing certain activities over others, right? So it becomes a bit of a challenge because the bits that we prioritize, we hope will address the risk. And if we've made a call that maybe wasn't the best at the time, or it was the best at the time based on the information we had, you could leave yourself open and vulnerable, which is where we're still seeing attackers moving around and being able to pivot, even though we've got really good compliance and regulatory requirements. It's just that the organizations struggle to actually implement and operationalize that in a cost-effective manner. And sometimes going internationally is even more expensive, or you now have to deal with cross-border data transfers, etc., which creates regulatory challenges as well. So all in all, Ghana is in a good space in terms of thinking about where to go from a cyber perspective. But I think from a perspective of having the capacity and cooperative measures, there's some areas that we can actually definitely look at improving and developing further there. So in terms of the real world consequences of these cyber attacks, I just wanted to give you a bit of a snapshot. I'm just going to build this slide out quickly. If you just give you a bit of a snapshot in terms of where cyber is across Africa, right? So it's not a victimless crime. Cybercrime reduced GDP within Africa by about 10%. That's $4 billion in 2021. That's a startling value. And if you think about what that 4 billion could be used for in terms of improvement, or in terms of the way that could be reinvested in the digital advancements of our societies and companies, it's a massive loss. So when people say, oh, but cybercrime, the insurance company will cover it, or if I'm a citizen and I've been defrauded, my bank will cover it. It's not victimless. That money has to come from somewhere, and that has a knock-on effect in terms of the cost of delivery and the kind of complexity that then follows from a digital perspective. You start having to create really complex authentication and monitoring and validation systems, which kind of don't really gel well with user experience, right? So cybercrime, not victimless, and a significant impact on our GDP as a continent. From a Ghanaian perspective, citizens lost about $19 million to cybercrime, and in 1,000 odd cases in 2020 alone, right? So following on from that, there are definitely victims. There are people who are actually losing money, and it's through cyber weaknesses, etc. From an Ethiopian perspective, the African Union headquarters, when they went online, they still suffer about 1,000 attacks a day, at least. It's about a 200% spike in cyber attack attempts, because the thinking is that these are international threat actors who are looking for plans, strategies around where countries in Africa are going. Whether rightly or wrongly, whether the African Union would have all of that detail is almost immaterial, but attackers see them as a high-value target. And as soon as AU went online, they just saw a 200% spike in cyber attacks. So they really had to scramble to get that capacity and the scale up to protect themselves. And the landscape is very much mobile as well as your laptops and your traditional compute environments, right? Android especially is a popular target for malware. Not only does it get used to scrape all the contacts and all the information and copy calls and spy on the users, but it also gets used to actually sometimes ransomware or as part of a mobile botnet as well. So if you consider this the number of mobile devices compared to the number of laptops, some people have 2 or 3 devices to one laptop. The threat landscape is vast, and it's an environment that's also very difficult to patch and maintain and keep up to standards because of the pace of change in that space. Samsung, for example, releases a new device on an annual basis, and the software vendors are releasing updates, pretty much on a continuous basis. So being able to maintain a strong posture in the mobile spaces is quite challenging by itself. And from a South African perspective, the stats that we had around ransomware was that in general, a ransomware attack cost about $3 million rand in ransom. So that's just the direct cost of the attack. In all, it costs about 10 to 12 million rand to clean up and recover services. So that's about just about $1 million per attack in order to get back on your feet. And if we look at the way this works, just because you paid the ransom doesn't mean you're going to get your data back, right? We are not dealing with people of honor. We are dealing with cyber criminals, with thieves. So only in 65% of the cases where there was a ransom attack and the ransom was paid, the enterprise actually received their keys. So payment does not mean you get your data back. You still need to have a really good backup and recovery capability and instant response capability and all those steps, because you can't rely on just paying the money to get your information back from a ransomware attack, right? And if you look at the cyber reality, as I said, there's 3.4 million cyber vacancies globally. And that ranges from people who are cyber leaders to the actual engineering and development folk, people who understand security in the different environments like cloud, mobile app development, etc. And that gap keeps growing because digital keeps growing. So as digital keeps growing, and now we're seeing the rise of AI, which we'll talk about in a bit, with AI becoming commercially available in a very usable format, there's already concerns around how do you secure that. So it's this never-ending target of making sure people are trained, that you've got the capacity, and that you are able to unlearn and relearn new skills from a cyber perspective, so that you're always relevant and meaningful in a cyber conversation. As I said, insider threat is a very, very costly challenge, with stats around 500K per incident. There was a local bank in South Africa that lost 100 million rand through an insider fraud event. The guy used weaknesses in the authentication protocols and he actually was able to process payments to his wife's account, and he stole 100 million rand. Right? Think about that. That's probably around $5 million in a very, very quick attack. We've also had incidents where in other southern countries, insiders have actually stolen money over a long period of time, and then in one final sort of grand finale stole a massive amount and then disappeared. And to this day, most of these guys have just vanished and they've not been found. So those are guys who've already planned their exit internationally, etc., and they've left the country and they're living somewhere else. So insider threats, absolutely a massive issue. And if you look at the trend around ransomware is being used in some very novel and interesting ways, and we'll talk about that just now as well. But that is still the number one threat, right? And one that's absolutely right up there, following on from the ransomware threat, is third-party risk. And this is because in a digital environment, in a connected enterprise, you are often dealing with people who are either directly connected to your network or organizations that you are sharing information with on a daily basis in order to conduct your business, right? They're part of your value chain, they're part of your ecosystem. And if you're a bank, for example, you probably have a very high degree of cyber maturity and a capability and in-house team, etc. But if you're a third party, that's a smaller provider who is, basically providing one service and is a very small IT team, etc., they probably just don't have the capabilities and the scale to develop a very, very mature cyber posture. So instead of targeting the bank, the threat actors are actually targeting these third parties, right? Either by contaminating software or by actually breaking into those environments and then using them as a jump point into the actual enterprise that's the high value target. So third party risk is absolutely a massive growth in attack vector, and it's one that's becoming complex to solve because you can't expect every chain in the third party ecosystem to, if you're a bank, as I said, to have the same level of security and capability as the bank would. It might not make financial sense for them. So you always end up kind of going towards a compromise situation, which is kind of challenging to manage as you go along. All of these factors have led to what I like to call the cybersecurity perma crisis. So perma crisis was the word of the year last year, and it's defined as an extended period of instability and insecurity, right? And from a cybersecurity perma crisis perspective, I look at it in the sense that, just as we start recovering from one issue, which was ransomware by itself, ransomware has now evolved into 3 or 4 different flavors of attack, and those are more challenging to kind of solve by themselves. So it's like it just feels like in the last 20 odd years, we've from a cybersecurity practitioner perspective, we've gone from one crisis to the next, and these crises have ranged from simple network outages, losing some data through a virus or a worm, to now having an existential crisis essentially with ransomware. There have been numerous reports of organizations that necessarily didn't make the headlines, but they've gone out of business because after the ransomware attack, they weren't able to recover. They didn't have backups. They just didn't have the capability. And then, more importantly, they didn't have the cash to kind of rebuild their environment. And they just basically had to just close their doors, right? So the reality of a ransomware attack taking an organization that is not prepared offline permanently is very, very real. And I think that is something that's really sharpened the mind of boards and executives at an exco level, because it's one of those risks that's a clear and present danger, and there's an expectation that is kind of looming large around how are we responding to this? What are we doing about it? What does this mean if we are taken offline and we can't recover in a quick enough manner? And the more real time your business, the more challenging it becomes, right? And we've spoken about ransomware, and this is why it's staying the number one threat, right? The initial ransomware attacks were just around encrypting a bit of data and demanding a payment, sort of your standard extortion scheme. Then attackers moved to this: we will exfiltrate data, and if the data is of a regulated nature, they'll threaten to publish it. So that means you're going to have to pay a fine, you're going to have to recover your data, and potentially, kind of deal with the media issues around data being published, especially regulated data. Then it became this triple threat where they would launch a denial of service against the organization after they've launched the ransomware. So not only were you dealing with systems that were just locked, you couldn't even get access from your systems to the internet or for other parties to come and help you. So you were basically just taken offline entirely as an organization. until you pay the ransom. So it's all around, creating as much leverage as possible for you to want to pay the ransomware attackers, right? And now there's this quadruple effect, which is around the harassment and attacks on third parties. And as I said, because we're all connected, what happens is that a victim of a ransomware attack becomes a jump point due to the inherent trust of the relationship to another attacker. So you end up with like an entire supply chain becoming affected from a ransomware perspective, and all sorts of other actions following from that, the exploitation, the DDoS piece, etc. And then obviously the ransomware demand is increased significantly because of the amount of damage that's being inflicted in such a short space of time, right? So ransomware is a threat that keeps on giving great returns to attackers. In 2022, ransomware earned probably around $14 billion for attackers. It's now available as ransomware as a service. So even if you want to go and take out your competitor, you don't need to have any technical skills. You can hire a team of people online, pay them in Bitcoin, and they will target a particular organization through phishing and through other methods to kind of launch ransomware and take those guys offline. So there's all sorts of threat actors who are emerging around this whole ransomware ecosystem. And the initial knee-jerk around ransomware and some of these cyber issues was really around, let's get some insurance, right? Get some insurance. And due to the massive rise in ransomware and the number of payments and payouts that have been required from these insurers, there are actually a lot of insurance organizations that are looking to exit the market from a cyber insurance perspective. And those that are staying are actually becoming very compliance focused in order to provide you with insurance. And we've seen a notable increase where one of the banks locally, they saw a 72% increase quarter on quarter on the insurance premium. And at the same time, their premiums, their protection, their cover dropped from about 1.8 billion rand to 1.5 billion rand. So you're going to pay a lot more for less coverage because insurance companies are very, very nervous about the ability to actually generate a profit on the back of the number of ransomware attacks, etc. And many of them are actually looking to exit the market as well. So insurance might not be the only, or might not be a viable or cost-effective solution across the market. And that being said, the requirements of the insurers are becoming so strict. There's also a significant cost of implementation and all of the cyber rigor you would need to actually implement before you could actually become eligible for cyber insurance as well. So that's one of the challenges. And if that wasn't all, troubling enough, we've been talking about AI, and I remember, even as a little boy, we've spoken about robots and artificial intelligence and all that sort of stuff. And now it's fascinating to see that future that we were talking about is here. There are several AI tools. The most famous of it, or generative AI tools. The most famous one at the moment is OpenAI's ChatGPT, which has the 4th iteration out now already, which are amazing and terrifying at the same time. Because if you just think about when you use ChatGPT, it's so easy to forget that you're actually talking to a machine. You're talking to a script, essentially. And the responses, the capabilities, the applications are just mind-blowing. So it took social media, etc., months to reach 100 million users. And ChatGPT did it in less than a week. So it's really something that's captured the imagination of people, and every person, from scholars to enterprise people to cooks to playwrights to you name it, are playing with ChatGPT in order to get a bit of information and to marvel at how this thing works, right? But so are the attackers. And ChatGPT 3 was being used to write malware into system processes for attackers who had used an approach of not knowing how to code. So basically, they wanted to test how difficult would it be for a layperson with zero coding knowledge, zero IT knowledge even, to kind of write malware. And with ChatGPT 3, they were able to do so quite easily, actually. ChatGPT 4, the the OpenAI folks said, no, they've built in more controls and they've built in more capability to actually stop that sort of behavior. But what's actually happened is that attackers were able to bypass the ChatGPT 4 controls even faster than the ChatGPT 3 controls. So it's become this new cat and mouse now of, can the people on an OpenAI side write better software to stop attackers from using their software to write better malware and better phishing emails and better, scripts that are more likely for people to actually be duped by. So as if dealing with the normal day-to-day cyber wasn't enough, we now already have the age of cyber-driven or AI-driven cyber attacks that are already in the wild, right? So it's only going to expand and grow from there. And I think from a cyber practitioner perspective, it's quite interesting. From a cybersecurity cloud and coding perspective, those are the 3 skills. If people are looking to get into the industry, people are looking to go and make a pivot in their careers, that is definitely where there's still huge demand, which creates a complexity by itself, right? Because in a given market, there is only a certain amount of people, right? There's only a certain number of skills, talent that's available. And what happens is that quite often people just get hired by different organizations, and you end up with this one person moving between, say, all the banks, all the telcos, and he's just earning more and more cash, but the sum total of cyber knowledge and cyber skill in the market is remaining the same, right? So the crunch is really around how do you actually bring more people in? How do you build more skills? How do you get cyber skills en masse? And it's a challenge that governments globally are dealing with. In South Korea, for example, they have an academy that churns out sort of 3,000 cyber skills a year. And that's like one end of the spectrum. And you've got other organizations where they've invested significantly on cyber academies and bringing people through the ranks from a consulting perspective, junior consultant perspective, all the way up to senior leadership. The converse, or the dark part of that, is that it's quite often difficult to still then maintain these people. So you might have an organization that has a cyber academy. They've built people from a grassroots level. And after 5 years, that person says, well, I've only worked for one organization. It's time to go and do something else, or emigrate, or go do something in another organization. So just because you have that grassroots capability doesn't mean we're building long-term durable skills as well. And it continues to be a really, really challenging space to resource and get scale in at the moment. And coming into that, if you look at it, it's always this notion that we just need the right skills, right? And this is where sometimes cybersecurity is its own worst enemy as well. And if you look at it, which skills are we talking about? Because this is a map of the 437 odd certifications that are currently available in the market. So if you're coming into the market and you want to be a cybersecurity person, where do you start? Right? Because all of these, the little blocks are very, very niche and very focused, and the longer, wider blocks cover more ground and they're a bit more general. But also just kind of creating a certification roadmap for people to grow skills and understand what's required and have enough knowledge, real world knowledge, in order to be an experienced and valuable cybersecurity person is quite challenging. And also, even if people go on all these certification courses and they do all the training, just suppose somebody spends their lifetime going off and doing these 437 certifications at massive cost, right? And it's extremely time consuming. Does not mean that they would be a good cybersecurity person. It's something that it's a bit of a challenging situation. So you've got to kind of pick and choose on this dashboard of where do you want to spend your time, how much can you invest, and what do you think you're going to get out of it as an individual and as an enterprise for what your cybersecurity requirement is, right? And if you look in those skills, at the same time, there's also been a lot of focus around technology, right? And this is a very quick map from Jan 2023 this year around the current landscape of cybersecurity vendors. Again, just very much similar to the certifications. It's been a bit of a land grab where every man and his dog wants to get a piece of the cyber pie, right? From very, very niche boutique type operations to vendors who are at a global scale trying to incorporate lots of different tools and tool sets into their portfolio to try and give you an end-to-end single pane of glass kind of view. Again, the rigor that's required to unravel what you need and when you need it, how much of it, is phenomenal, right? So it's again one of those things where cyber is not being its own good friend here, right? It becomes, when you start looking at cyber and you start delving into this, you can spend a lifetime just kind of working through all of these different capabilities and these different tools. And none of these actually on this, even though this is from January, none of these actually talk about cyber in AI. So expect a gold rush of vendors talking about their tool now with AI goodness, or being able to protect you from AI-driven cyber attacks because it's good marketing, right? So the land grab is very, very real. And it becomes very challenging for ExCo's boards, non-cyber people, to kind of make head or tail of what the heck is going on in the space, right? And just wrapping it all up, the future of cyber is really one in which trying to chase a technology or a machine is really, probably not going to give us the best returns in the long run. We've got to deal with it being more human-centric, and that is around making cyber approachable, that the user experience is good, that people understand how their behaviors impact the cyber posture, because that by far is one of the biggest levers and factors in terms of security outcomes. You can have the best tools, you can have the sharpest cyber people, but if your people and your organizational culture does not actually ingest that and absorb it, you're not going to actually get any real progress on your cyber program, right? It's a collective effort. The notion that we could shrink our attack surface, there was a whole discussion, and vendors especially were talking about, turn off unneeded services and do all of these things and shrink your attack surfaces. That's all good. Yes, you could do that to a point. But if you look at any organization now, with the number of mobile devices, the number of third parties, the number of contractors in there, the links they have and the data sharing that they have internationally, the attack surface is just growing. So, and the challenge is, part of that attack surface might not even be yours to control, but you're relying on it as part of your business value chain. So the idea that we can just close everything off, protect things, lock things down, those days are gone. If you do that, you're basically not going to be able to effectively execute on the user experience, the customer experience, and the digital journey you envisage as a business. It's going to create a lot of friction between security organizations and the digital and innovation teams. You're going to end up with these people, kind of every time digital says yes, security is going to say no, and eventually there's going to be like fist fights in the parking lot kind of thing. So just be aware of that. The cyber security theater no longer scales. And what this means is that, for a long time, there's been this, I suppose, requirement of cybersecurity people, CISOs, etc., when they're reporting to boards and executives, to paint a positive picture, right? To say that we're doing it's bleak, but we're doing all of these things, and we're going to protect our organizations, our environment, and it's okay. It's trending in the right place. We're going. It's okay. And then the ExCo says, okay, cool. Sounds like you're doing a good job. Come back in a quarter's time and tell us how you're progressing. And that sort of theater is not in fashion anymore. I think those days of just, as you can't go the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because that doesn't work. That's a waste of time. You can't keep saying the sky is falling, and neither can you actually say, as a cybersecurity person, hand in heart, that I've got everything under control. I know exactly where the risks are. We've got a whole bunch of people and whatever, and we are covering all the risk, and it's under control. I think there's the answer is in the middle somewhere there. That it's like, yes, as a cyber function, we can control some of these things, but some of these other things are just absolutely like a bit of a wild west, and we're trying to figure this out, and we're gonna spend some time on that. And that there is risk. I think for a long time, cyber people have been trying to say, no, there's no risk. We've got this under control. It's cool. And then you have a breach, the CISO gets fired, and there's a new CISO coming in, and the cycle continues, right? So that theater is just not going to buy us any friends from a cybersecurity perspective. The future is really around having honest, meaningful conversations about risk, what the tooling can do, what the people can do, and what the budget can do as well. and let organizations and excos and boards make decisions about risk in a much more refined manner. And the CISO as well. In many organizations, the CISO is an extremely technical person who's come up from an operations type background, right? And there's typically 3 CISO archetypes. The ops person who's come from a technical background. It's either, or it's a legal person who's come in from a compliance perspective, or it's a business person sort of coming in to kind of run the security function as a business, right? And that's generally the 3 we see. And in reality, you need all 3 types of experience to be an effective CISO, right? You must be able to talk the technical language to technical teams, because you know how technical teams are sometimes. If you're not able to speak the jargon, they're not going to listen to you, right? Techies like to talk techie with people who understand at that level. But likewise, if you talk techie to an exco, they're not going to know what the heck you're talking about. So you need to be able to shift gears as a CISO and take that technical knowledge and convert into business speak, right? And let business people understand what this means. And also at the same time, be aware of what your legal and regulatory and compliance imperatives are, so that you don't bring the company into into a situation where you're facing fines and legal repercussions because you didn't actually cover some of the basics, right? So the role of the CISO is now becoming that of a risk decision facilitator. It's really, as I said, giving exco's boards a view of what the real landscape looks like, what the tooling and the people are capable of. This is where the risks are. This is what we can manage. This is where there's some challenges, and give the business that perspective so that they can actually decide how to deal with it. And that's a very different type of management style. It's a very different type of person as well. But it's critical in order to actually move away from this technology-focused, certification-focused rat race that cyber's been in for a while we're still seeing a lot more attacks, and it just doesn't seem to be slowing down, right? And I think the future of cyber is one of that, where we are going to be integrating much more of the user experience and the customer experience into the thinking, rather than just looking at controls and tooling. So that's my piece. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it was valuable. I'm just going to hand back to the team to take you through the rest of the day. Enjoy.
Right, Samresh, thank you so much for taking us through. Yeah, thank you, Samresh. Thank you for taking us through the future of cyber. This is very interesting. There are some questions there, but during the Q&A session, I'll give you opportunity to respond to that. In the interest of time, we'll move straight to the keynote address, which is supposed to be delivered by the Honorable Minister of Communication. But she is ably represented by Mr. Stephen Ujo-Seshi, who is the head of National Computer Emergency Response Team at the Cybersecurity Authority. Stephen, you have the ground, please. Kindly deliver the.
All right. Hello, can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we can. Yes, audible.
All right, great. Good morning, everybody. And I'm glad to be here representing the Honorable Minister. Let me start by saying research and development provides a better understanding of weaknesses in systems and networks and how to protect them. It's also important because it offers powerful knowledge and insights to drive improvements to existing processes. R&D is therefore necessary to investigate current and emerging cybersecurity challenges in order to develop appropriate responses and solutions. I therefore congratulate Deloitte for this initiative, which will serve as a guide for stakeholders in the sector. Taking a look at the environment, we are aware that universal and meaningful digital connectivity is a key enabler for digital transformation and meeting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. It is essential that as we pursue Ghana's digital transformation agenda, we make it a priority for everyone to enjoy a safe, satisfying, enriching, productive, and affordable online experience. Statistics from the International Telecommunications Union, ITU, indicates that Globally, an estimated 5.3 billion people, which represent 2/3 of the world's population, use the internet. But there is 2.7 billion people that are still offline. And this, of course, means there's huge market for businesses to exploit. We are certainly also aware of the several emerging technologies that will affect the future of work. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, blockchain technology, robotic process automation, the Internet of Things, quantum computing, to name a number of them, will require organizations to adapt how they conduct business. In other words, organizations need to embrace technological change and learn how to use it to their benefit while delivering value to their customers. If we take a look at the threat landscape, we know that along with the great opportunities for socio-economic development that digitalization brings, there is also the threat of misuse by malicious actors. In Africa, online scams, cyber extortion, ransomware, business email compromise, and botnets are prominent threats. According to Interpol's 2021 Africa Cyber Threat Assessment Report, more than 61% of companies in the region were affected by ransomware in the year 2020. The effects were personal data breaches, financial loss, and reputational damage to organizations. Businesses have the responsibility to put in place succession plans, business continuity policies, and incident management frameworks to ensure their resilience. According to a 2023 report by the World Economic Forum, business leaders are more aware of the organization's cybersecurity issues than the year before. They are also more willing to address those risks. Nonetheless, cybersecurity leaders still struggle to clearly articulate the cybersecurity risks to the organizations in a language that their business counterparts fully understand and can act upon. As a result, agreeing on how best to address cybersecurity risk remains a challenge for some organizational leaders. Ultimately, cybersecurity leaders must present cybersecurity issues in terms that board-level executives can understand and act on. Business leaders on their part need to accept more accountability for operational cybersecurity requirements to advance the organizational capabilities. Compliance to legal and regulatory frameworks are necessary to ensure service providers and professionals meet required standards, making it possible for individuals, businesses, and governments to engage the right persons and institutions and to attract the right talent. The National Cybersecurity Policy and Strategy is an intervention aimed at addressing current developments and risks related to cyber activities. In Ghana, the Cybersecurity Authority is the lead agency under the Ministry of Communications and Digitalization with responsibility for the development and regulation of cybersecurity in the country. As mandated under the Cybersecurity Act 1038, the CSA has several regulatory interventions in place to guide businesses while ensuring sanity in the digital ecosystem. Let me touch on 3 of them. First, starting this month of March, the CSA commenced the implementation of a regime to license cybersecurity service providers and accredit cybersecurity establishments and professionals. At the heart of this intervention are a number of objectives. First, to give recognition to cybersecurity professionals that are key in supporting and sustaining the digital transformation of Ghana. 2, to ensure that qualified professionals with the proven capabilities provide services to ensure a secure and resilient digital ecosystem. Third, to provide greater assurance of cybersecurity and safety to consumers. And fourth, to address national security concerns. Let me add that if you haven't already commenced the process as a cybersecurity provider or professional, please do so and engage the CSA on any challenge you may encounter during the process. September 30th, which is when the grace period ends, is not that far off. The second intervention I'll talk about is about critical information infrastructure. Ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of such infrastructure underpins the directive that was released to provide a baseline for information and cybersecurity requirements that all designated CIIs, irrespective of their maturity level or the sector or the institution, must comply with. The directive further outlines technical and organizational measures to be adopted by designated CIIs in protecting their systems and networks. Finally, The development of sectoral computer emergency response teams, CERTs, is another intervention that is designed to ensure effective coordination and response to cybersecurity incidents by the national CERT. The telecommunications, government, and financial sector CERTs are currently operational, with work commenced for the energy and health sectors. I urge all businesses to show interest in these key regulatory interventions and to incorporate them in their governance, risk, and compliance programs. Deloitte's 2023 Global Future of Cyber Survey highlights that hiring and developing the right human resources for cybersecurity, executing through digital planning, and extensive partnerships across ecosystems while incorporating cybersecurity into strategic business initiatives are the keys to growth. On that score, cybersecurity capacity building through the exchange of information, training, study visits, etc., is important to help mitigate a myriad of challenges identified by the survey. This will contribute significantly to producing competent professionals for the cybersecurity industry. Effective cybersecurity also requires a diversity of perspectives. The World Economic Forum reported in 2019 that companies with gender-diverse leadership have higher operating margins and make better business decisions. Efforts can therefore be made to bridge the digital gap by training more women in cybersecurity. One such initiative, which is championed by the Ministry of Communications and Digitalization, is the Girls in ICT program. It has trained over 100,000 females in ICT and cybersecurity. Closing the gender gap in cybersecurity, therefore, isn't just a matter of right and wrong. It is good for business and good for security. In conclusion, it's important for organizations to align themselves with cybersecurity regulations to better position them to be resilient in the face of cyber attacks and to position them as well to benefit from the development of the ecosystem. Secondly, collaboration between the public and private sectors, including meaningful partnerships between government agencies and private entities, is essential for achieving the vision we have set for ourselves, a secure and resilient digital Ghana. I thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen, for this presentation. We are most grateful to your outfit for this presentation. So at this point, we're going to present the report as already stated on our agenda. My colleague, Nina, will start. Just a moment.
Nina Corley is a cybersecurity manager within the Risk Advisory Division of Deloitte with over 10 years of experience focusing on cyber and technology risk within the financial services industry and telecommunication industry. Over the past few years, she has played active roles on implementation of information security standards, IT controls transformation and assurance, auditing against international standards, Swift customer security controls framework, IT infrastructure assessment, data migration and post-implementation review, third-party and revenue assurance for key Deloitte clients within the banking, telecommunication, and other services industries. Sheriff Issa is an information security governance, risk and compliance professional with 15 years of work experience and currently a risk advisory manager at Deloitte Ghana. His experience spans IT management, IT project management, training, business continuity, and information security. He has consulted for several banks and fintechs across Africa on the implementation, maintenance, and auditing of international standards. He has also supported banks in Ghana to comply with the Bank of Ghana Cyber Information Security Directive.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are,
Sure.
Nina. Yes, you are, Nina.
Once again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Deloitte 2023 Global Future of Cyber Service. So we may ask, why did we conduct this survey? So as Deloitte, first of all, wanted to have a clear picture where cyber stands and where it's going. We also wanted to have an understanding how leaders across the industry are building long-term value by putting cybersecurity at the heart of their business. We also wanted to have an overview what organizations are struggling to leverage on harness the benefits of putting cyber at the heart of their organization. So in the next 15 minutes, we are going to touch on how the future of cyber is looking, and we also discuss how cyber as a business enabler has helped the organization. We'll also look at the snapshot of the maturity, and we'll also discuss the digital transformation in focus, and we'll also see where industry stands when it comes to maturity. At the end, we'll also discuss the next step. So for Deloitte, in order to understand the future of cyber, we interviewed more than 1,000 senior cyber decision makers across various industry and geography. So in terms of location, 35% of those organizations were from North America and South America, 25% were Asia Pacific, and 40% were from Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So in terms of the industry, our samples cut across all industries, starting from the consumer, energy resources, financial services, life science and healthcare, technology, media, and telecom. So in terms of the size, our survey was just limited to 20 countries with minimum of 1,000 employees. So what we did was to interview all those participants and try to get an understanding their view on cyber threats and where they stand if it comes to their business activity. And guess what? What we discovered is that there is a new reality which is coming. So cyber is more now than technology focused. Today, cyber means businesses. So we are trying to see that organizations are exploring how integrating cyber thinking and action into their organization will help them to drive more businesses and even get more value. So we also think that there are some organizations that cyber has become an integral part of their business strategy, firmly embedded as a key element in supporting their organization ambition and also in driving continuous business value. So our survey also shows that for any organization, the future of cyber will be shaped by either the C-suite and board commitments, and also by the business value that enterprise organizations can envisage with cyber. Our research also shows that there is a new dynamic emergencies where Chief Information Security Officer, along with the board, are going to partnership and work together in driving business and also innovation. So I can say that in terms of Ghana perspective, based on the new directive that we are seeing on the market, we are going to see more focus on cybersecurity as an enterprise business risk and also as an ingredient for business transformation. So we can see also that cyber role as a business enabler is growing rapidly, and this cannot be ignored. Travel business impact, with 86% of executives report that cyber initiative made a significant positive contribution on at least one key business priority. We also learned that cyber as a business enabler is becoming more evident at the boardroom. So with 70% of survey respondents reported that cyber was at least discussed by their boards on regular basis, either monthly or quarterly. So what this says is that organizations that have acknowledged that there is a strong connection between their cyber efforts and business value, they are more likely to report that the cyber initiative made a significant impact on either their brand reputation, customer and digital trust, operational stability, including cyber, their third party, and also partner ecosystem. So having said that, we can see that the cyber trend landscape remain active. So our survey shows that 91% of organizations reported at least one event compared to 88% in our previous survey that was conducted in 2021. So we also learned from our survey that 58% of organizations are planning to increase their cyber investment in the next year. So this simply shows that cybersecurity has now become a focal point for business initiative activity and also for investment. So what is the why maturity matters? So as part also of the survey, we try to identify high-performing and cyber mature organization based on 3 factors. The first one was their cyber planning, which means we're looking at organization that has put in place both strategic, operational, tactical plan that help them to diagnostic against or respond to all threats. We also try to understand if those organizations has a cybersecurity strategy which is aligned with their business strategy. The second point was to look at the engagement on cyber at the board level. So we try to see if those organizations has the board that at least discuss on the daily basis or even monthly basis all the issues that are pertain to those cyber incidents. So the last point was cyber activity initiative. We were looking at the organization that has put in place the risk assessment program, both qualitative and quantitative, and also looking at the organization that has at least the incident plan in place, and not just have the plan, but that plan is tested on a regular basis. So after our survey, we tried to segment the outcome into 3 categories. And we noted that there are 3 categories. There are organizations that has low cyber maturity. This organization, we noted that they have not adhered to none of the state of the leading practices. And also 41% were found to be in the medium cyber maturity. And this organization have adhered at least to a set of the leading practices. And those that were with high cyber maturity, there were 21. So for this organization, we noticed that they have adhered to 2 or 3 sets of leading practices. So at the end, what is the story? The story says that regardless of your size or your industry that you are coming from, you can still move to the next level. You can still be an organization with cyber maturity or identified as a high performer. So why does maturity matters? So maturity matters at the sense that 55% of high maturity companies reported that cyber provide them with confidence to try new things, with 70% said that cyber was making an impact on both enhancing trust and enabling efficiency. And 65% cited that resilience and agility as benefits of cyber. So we can see that despite cyber potential as a business enabler, the ability to leverage it effectively is inconsistent across organizations. So we have seen that some organizations have emerged themselves as a clear reader defining a path to value for others to follow. So at this time, I'll now welcome Sherif to share with us some of the lessons that the organization that found themselves within raw and medium maturity can leverage from those that are mature to be able to move to their next level. So welcome, Sherif.
Thank you very much, Nina. Thank you. So taking from where Nina left, we're looking at the lessons that we can learn from the high mature organizations. And there's a drastic shift from the era where we think cyber strategies are always tailored around IT, but now it's going through business where there's an alignment of business objective with cybersecurity objective. And for the high matured organization, we saw that they are focusing on 5 key areas to improve their cybersecurity engagement within their enterprise. So these are the 5 lessons we're looking at. The first one is a multi-directional engagement. The second one is appreciating and investing in talent. The third one is robust planning. The fourth one is criticality to the data transformation initiatives. And the final one we're going to look at is a diverse ecosystem of tools and services. So from the survey, we've got the understanding that organizations are engaging, especially the highly matured organization, highly cyber mature organizations are engaging key stakeholders throughout their enterprise. And from the report, the high matured organizations, 60% of them have a governing body within the cybersecurity space. That is individuals at the top level managing cybersecurity affairs, and 36% of the organizations within the medium cyber maturity level also had governing body, and their low medium counterpart had 22% of them had governing body. The second item we're looking at is scenario planning. So from the survey, we got to understand that majority, or let's say the high matured organizations have incident response scenario planning in place, both at the tactical and the strategic level of the organization. We could see that their medium counterpart, 30% of them had incident response and scenario planning, and only 20% of the organization within the low, medium cyber maturity medium had incident response scenario planning for both enterprise-wide and at the board level. Now, in terms of talent, from the report, we get the understanding that 47% of the highly matured organizations within the cyber space, they always mention that there's a lack of skill of cyber professionals has been one of their major challenges in managing cyber security within the organization. And you can see that those within the low category, 37% of them reported lack of skilled cyber professionals as their major challenge. Now, if you look at the graph, you can see that majority of the organizations, cumulatively 54%, are using training and certification programs as a major source of engaging skilled professionals within the cybersecurity space. Likewise, flexible hybrid working options. I mean, looking at the exception of COVID and work from home and the likes, hybrid working or remote working has come to stay. And this is what these organizations are leveraging on to maintain or to attract skilled cybersecurity professionals. So we look at the robust planning. Robust planning from our reports, 87% of the high matured organizations said they have cybersecurity incident response plan in place, and these plans get updated and tested every year. 91% of these high matured organizations also indicated that they have an operational and strategic plan in place to defend against any form of cyber threats. And 88% of them also mentioned that they have a comprehensive plan to assess how they can protect their data throughout the data life cycle. So as part of our survey, we asked the respondents to indicate the areas that they think they will invest in terms of technologies, and they should state their priorities. And from the outcome of the survey, cloud was was the number one of the technology areas that these organizations wanted to focus on, followed by data analytics, followed by OT and ICS, followed by AI and cognitive computing and 5G. Just opposing this with our last report, the 2021 report, we can see that 5G has come in whilst the new or upgrade of ERP program has exited the top 5. And we've also seen that cloud computing or cloud has replaced data analytics in its first position. So this tells us that these are the technologies that we need to look out for. And as Samresh mentioned in his presentation, I mean, AI, ChatGPT and the likes, we are all seeing what these tools are doing. Now, in the same survey, we asked our respondents to indicate how they think cyber will help in enhancing or help them achieve these technologies that they wanted to procure or they wanted to use. And if you look at the graph, you get to know that the high matured organizations appreciate the need for cyber within their technology journey compared to their peers within the medium and low categories. So we also engage our respondents in terms of vendors that they have or they engage in. So on the average, within the 3 categories of organizations, that's a low, medium, high, the average at the time of the survey, they had an average of 7 vendors. These are vendors within the cybersecurity space. And when we asked them of when they envisage within the 2 years, how many vendors they would have, on the average across the 3 groups, maturity groups, the average was 11. If you look at the graph, you can see that the organization within the high cyber maturity almost, they are dealing with the service providers within all this space, from cyber cloud to data protection throughout to recover and transform. So these are the services that the respondents were relying on, third-party related services that the respondents were relying on. And it's very evident from the graph that high mature organizations within the cyberspace are more likely to engage third parties for cybersecurity related services. Now, I want to know where industries stand when it comes to maturity. I know in Nina's submission, she mentioned that in terms of maturity, size of the organization doesn't come to play. But here, we're looking at it from those 3 indicators Nina mentioned. The first one was level of cyber planning. The second one was board involvement in cybersecurity. The third one was cyber activities implemented. So these 3 criteria, we are only using to measure these industries, the 6 industries that we surveyed. And you can see that when it comes to cyber activities implemented within these organizations, the energy sector, the government and public service sector, and the technology, media, and telecom services are, they are slightly ahead of the pack compared to their peers, whilst the financial service sector and consumer service sector are slightly behind. Then if you compare them against the criteria of cyber planning and strategy, you can see that the energy sector, the financial service sector, the life sciences and healthcare sector are also ahead of the pack when it comes to cyber planning, whilst the consumer industry is behind. Now, it looks nice as presented, but if you compare this with the situation in Ghana, we may not get similar reports or outputs. From where we sit, we know when it comes to maturity per industry, the financial service sector, it will be on the top, no twist about that due to regulations. And maybe followed by the technology, media, and telecom industry. So when we look at these 3 criteria as we used to get our maturity levels, we can say that when we come to Ghana, in the case of Ghana, the financial services industry will be at the top, followed by the technology, media, and telecom industry. So where do we go from here? So gone are the days when we thought cybersecurity only comes in when there's the need. Now it's not supposed to be seen as an afterthought. It's supposed to be integrated in all business processes within the organization. We're also seeing the need for integrate security, the need for include security in technology acquisition, so that it will have the capability of helping the organization to achieve its business objectives. So in array of Deloitte Ghana, we provide cybersecurity related services, from standard implementation to vulnerability assessment to business continuity management. At this point in time, please, you can get in touch with us for any cybersecurity related matter or any information you need to, clarification you need from us in terms of this presentation. Thank you very much for your time. At this point in time, we'll go straight into the panel discussion session. So we'll take the profile of our panelists, then we go into the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Temitope Aladenusi is the Risk Advisory Leader of Deloitte West Africa. Tope has provided assurance advisory services to over 30% of the companies quoted on the Nigeria Stock Exchange and 85% of the commercial banks in Nigeria. He has served 75% of the GSM companies in Nigeria, several multinational manufacturing and oil and gas companies, as well as government institutions. He has worked in Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, Cameroon, South Africa, and the UK, and has also serviced clients in 16 countries. Henrietta Polly has 25 years of experience in information technology in roles ranging from IT operations management, IT audit, cyber and information security in the banking environment. She is currently the Chief Information Security Officer of Cowbank. Daniel Jampo has more than 25 years of work experience as an IS professional, most of which have been in the financial services industry. He is currently the Head of Group Investigations at Ecobank Transnational Incorporated, covering all affiliates in Africa and other locations. Prior to this role, he led the group's cyber and information security audits and assurance function. He is the president of ISACA Accra chapter and is CISA C-Risk and CGEIT certified. Kojo Osafo-Marfo is currently head of the Cybersecurity Division and Chief Information Security Officer of the National Communications Authority, the communications regulator under the Ministry of Communication and Digitization. He consults in security, systems, and ICT as directed, and in the past lectured in the Computer Science Department of Ashesi University. Kojo represents Ghana at the International Telecommunications Union.
Okay, so we move straight into our panel discussion. As indicated, we have seasoned panelists on this call, and we're going to have 2 rounds of questioning for our panelists. I'll be starting with Daniel Jampo. Hello, Daniel.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Great. Yes, please. So would want to know from you if you can help us understand what we mean by cyber maturity.
Right, thank you, Sheriff. Cyber maturity has to do with an institution being able to demonstrate its readiness and effectiveness in managing basically cyber risks and threats. Okay. There are a couple of things that come to mind when you talk about cybersecurity. Okay, it's the maturity. Okay, I'll go through maybe basic things that an institution is likely to go through when you are talking about the maturity. Risk management, that is identifying your critical infrastructure, your key risks as far as a company's business is concerned, putting in place the necessary security controls, training and awareness. Incident response has to do with being able to use the tools or whatever you have put in place to be able to respond adequately to incidents and address them, and then also goes through the process of continuous improvement. That is a cyclical thing, continuing to improve what you have. Now, there are various frameworks that will help an institution to reasonably determine the level of maturity that the institution has achieved. I do not advise that an institution will stick to just one particular framework. There are a number of them. I will refer to, for instance, the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, which many of us use. And that has done a broad category of identification, protection, detection, response, and recovery. I'm not going to go into this because of the time that we have been allocated. Okay. Now there's also the CMMI frameworks that covers basically people, process, and technology. And there's one framework or chart for cybersecurity that will also help an institution to determine whether it is at a basic level or intermediate or at a mature stage. Okay, so what to do basically for cybersecurity maturity is available and well documented and can be gotten from many sources. However, how to achieve maturity is where we have a challenge. Okay, there are two main categories here: capacity maturity and then process maturity. And I will use illustrations to show what I mean. Password management. Okay, there's simple passwords. In fact, if you put a PIN of 4 digits, it's enough to protect something. Okay, and if you enter into an institution where they are completely alien to cybersecurity related issues, then you don't have to start with complex passwords that expire every 7 days and so on. They are not going to be able to cope with that. So there's a process that when you go into an institution to help them attain maturity in cybersecurity, you go through from, you put something in place. Definitely a door that is locked is much better than a door left ajar where any passing pedestrian can enter. Okay, so put something in place. Basic security, I talked about passwords, but there are many other things. If today we are talking about financial services institutions, then protecting their digital platforms with appropriate tools is also like basic. Okay, and if you are operating in like the ministries, we have seen some of the websites of some ministries being defaced and so on. So putting in place protection for some of these infrastructure is in a basic way is where everybody starts from. Now, there should be a quick progression through development to an advanced level. What I would mention here is it is important that anybody implementing or going through cyber maturity first has a clear and in-depth understanding of the business because that is what will determine what the critical infrastructure in the business is. And that is what will determine the kind of controls that are put in place, whether we have simple passwords or complex passwords with, you know how it comes, everything that you know of, that the password cannot be repeated again for the next 7 years, and that it should expire after every 3 days to be renewed and so on. We also need to put in place documentation.
Okay.
Documentation ensures that the institution is able to follow up with whatever has been put in place, and anybody that enters the institution is able to know what is expected of them, policies and procedures. And finally, I would say with maturity that the steps should be repeatable,
Great.
that everyone in the institution is able to know what they should do. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the insightful submission. And we'll move on to our next panelist, Enrita. Enrita, I would like to know from you, I mean, from the backdrop of Jane's submission, how can organizations improve on the maturity of the cybersecurity program? And we want you to help us respond to this in the next 3 minutes.
Thank you, Sheriff, and thank you for having me on the call. And as our first presenter indicated, that currently the threat landscape that organization find itself in is very dynamic. And as such, continuous monitoring and continuous improvement is the way to go. Now, some of the areas that organizations need to consider to improve their maturity level, I'm going to take it into 2 categories. I'm looking at administrative controls and technology controls. I think Daniel has mentioned some of them, or a few of them. Now, in terms of administrative controls, we are looking at having the structure in place. And I think your, in terms of your survey analysis that you conducted, within some of the organizations indicated that currently a lot of board members are showing interest in the cybersecurity activities within organization. So we have under administration, we have your governance, you have committees that periodically meet to discuss the cybersecurity condition or posture of the organization. You have the policies and procedures to cover quite a number of activities. Currently, because of a lot of employees are now being can now use their smart devices to access corporate information. So we bring your own device policy has to be operational to also protect corporate information. And then we'll look at the password policy and among others. Now, to move into, you can also look at implementing framework, which Daniel has also touched on some few ones. And now to move to the technology controls, we look at in terms of how do you enforce some of the policies. You look at bring your own device, you can deploy mobile device management or mobile application management solution to help you enforce this policy. When it comes to identification, authentication, and then authorization of users, there are quite a number of tools. If currently you are using a single factor authentication, you can move on by improving it by deploying or implementing multi-factor authentication. Now, we also have tools that can help you to also manage your privileged identity users to ensure that unauthorized access is curtailed. And also one key thing that most of the time we always put it at the back burner is a human firewall. Our first presenter indicated that now cyber security is no more technical, it's now human-centric. So it's important that the focus also goes focus on human firewall strengthens, because if you don't have a strong human firewall, irrespective of the kind of cutting-edge solution that controls are implement, you will still have human errors. So it's important that you can have frequent periodic training, awareness training, and you don't end there. you also determine the effectiveness of the training by rolling out phishing simulation to determine how effective the training that you are providing to your users are. And also look at assessments, security assessments to identify weaknesses within your system, and then the necessary remediation is implemented. And then lastly, I mentioned earlier, continuous monitoring and improvements. You need to have a security operations center with a very strong sense to support you to be able to quickly detect and respond to cybersecurity alert. I think these are some of the few measures that need to be implemented by organizations to improve their maturity levels.
Great. Thank you very much, Anita, for your submission. I want to move on to Kojo. Kojo, we want to know if can you let us know some of the challenges of attaining a matured cybersecurity program?
Very much.
We want you to do this within 3 minutes for us.
Within 3 minutes. Okay,
yes,
I'll try my best. So as far as maturity, Ghana has been involved in a few projects or measurements, and mainly the scoping is very important in that for any organization, you need to look at what has to be done, the prioritization. And you will also have a lot of stakeholders, right? And you need to realize that change is going to happen. So the scope part, you need to look at. The second item is looking at aligning your strategies, your policies, your services and operations. Often they seem to be in some organizations a bit misaligned, and it will happen as business is evolving, customers are changing, the needs are changing and so on, but there has to be some effort. So as they said, there are different types of CISOs or different types of security people, some looking at legal, some looking at technical, but whatever your background is, or whatever the focus of the company, you have to be doing an intentional effort of aligning these, right? And managing resources is very challenging because often the business will have conflicting, especially when it comes to security, looking at how much resource can you dedicate. So you need a culture in the organization that always looks at doing better, looking at how people can be both honest and without being too aggressive about it, so that you can understand what's going on. The various performance management systems that are there, as other panelists have said, you need to have your security team, but if the people in the organization or even your clients and your customers are not really being appreciative of risk, business continuity, disaster recovery, regardless of whether kind you are classified as critical, it's something that you need to make people be part of it, right? So awareness, training, education across the organization and getting people really involved. And of course, you need to be able to set a target. As Jampo indicated, there are many frameworks, so many documents to look at. You need to pick something that you're comfortable with. You need to look at the language because sometimes people don't understand. And you need to really communicate so that your organization can look at, generally, those frameworks going from informal to formal. I know Ghana, we struggle with the communication, writing. We are doing well, but you need to bring people in where you say, you know what, you can't be ad hoc all the time. Can you have consistency and structure? I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like the Bible. You came out and around Deuteronomy, they give them the laws, and then it's like, now live and show what you're doing. So the organization needs to set a target. And really, even if you can't do everything, just looking at a lot of the standards, usually they will have a planning, doing, checking, PDCA cycle. So just look to make sure that you are consistently performing, consistently recording, and trying to integrate what the business finds important. So I hope that with this, everyone can see how they can fit in. And when you go back, people can see how they can really grow the maturity of their businesses. Go from informal to formal with good metrics, good reporting for all the different stakeholders. And that way you can always be moving forward and demonstrating that you are doing so. Thank you. I hope this is.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kojo, for your submission. Now, the last question for the first round will go to Temitope. Temitope, we would like to know from you the benefits of having a mature cybersecurity program for organizations.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on this very high-powered webinar. It's been so wonderful so far. First of all, I would say that I want to appreciate all the speakers and panelists. So far, they've really spoken to the heart of the matter. In terms of the benefits of having a matured cybersecurity program, the first I would say is that it gives you a reasonable assurance that your business objectives will be met. Every business today and every organization have objectives, and we are largely trading in cyberspace. We are doing things in cyberspace. Even though we're not heavy on cyberspace as far as this is concerned, we are connected to cyberspace. And so we need to ensure that we are not unduly exposed as we transact or as we do business on the internet. And what that maturity does for you is like it gives you that reasonable assurance that your objectives, will be met. You don't want to be that low-hanging fruit that can easily be brought down easily. I look at Samresh gave, some statistics with ransomware. Imagine a situation whereby we've seen instances where companies, let me just give a particular one in Nigeria. There was a company that was attacked last year, and the bad guys demanded for $10 million, as ransom for being attacked. Imagine $10 million off your P&L for the year. That's massive. So we may think that these things are not, maybe they are far-fetched. Some companies still think that way, but we are here for business. We are here many times for profit and for impact. And once your shareholders' value has been eroded by cyber attack, that assurance that you're going to meet your business objectives is being hampered. Then also it can increase your market share. It increases your market share and profitability. Ramesh mentioned something very important, that research shows that cybercrime reduces GDP in Africa by more than 10%. That's massive. Imagine 10% of Africa GDP being reduced by cybercrime. And what that means is that once people are not prepared, their share of the market, their profitability can easily be eroded by cyber attacks. I'll give you a simple example that happened recently in Nigeria, and it's something that's applicable across board. I'm sure many of you heard about the government policies around Naira, which then forced many people to go into online transactions. Now, for many of the organizations, many of the banks, their systems started to become very slow. Some systems are not even available. And that's also a cybersecurity issue, because many times when you talk about cybersecurity, people always think about confidentiality and integrity. But there's a third leg, which is the availability leg, which is, are your systems up and running when you need them? Are they functioning very well? Now, because of the volume and of the transaction, we saw that people, were having issues and, transacting. And those organizations that their systems were robust, people start talking about them in good light and say, that's where you should be doing your business with. That's the bank you should be banking with. So it's like the future, we always expose your capabilities. If you are not ready, it's just a matter of time. It will show that you are not ready, you are not matured. And that time may be when you need those customers, the most. And lastly, I would say that it helps us to save costs. I always use this quote I learned from John Maxwell years ago. He says, pay now and play later. If you play now, you pay later. But it's always cheaper to pay now. Many companies I have seen, especially in Africa, they like to be reactive regarding cyber. When it's time for investments, they want to just spend so low, or they are dragging. But when they are hit, they are ready to spend a lot of money. And I've seen that a lot. There's a particular organization we're talking to once, and we're saying invest of $50 million in cybersecurity. And they were dragging and saying, no, this is so much money. The next thing, they were hit by attackers and they are losing 2-point-something billion. So it is better to be proactive and save costs than for you to be reactive. And that's one of the reasons why in Deloitte and Ghana and West Africa, We've now deployed a 24/7 SOC operation center that can help clients to be proactive, monitoring their systems on a real-time basis, so that when issues come, they are proactive about it, they can detect it promptly and contain it before it becomes a major issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tope. Pay now and play later, or play now and pay later. Thank you. This is a key takeaway. Thank you. So we'll go to the second round of questions. I'll be starting with Daniel. Daniel wants to know, is there a correlation between mature cybersecurity program and business sustainability?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is a direct correlation. I guess I will echo again Tope's last statement. Pay now and play later, or play now and pay later. Okay. Reputation is key in many businesses today. And if there is not the perception of security around a business or an institution, people will shy away from it. Today, if there is social media noise, just noise, whether it's substantiated or not, about an institution, that can cause people, companies and institutions to move away from that company. Okay, so there are a couple of things. Protection of data. This is important. Now, if your data is well protected and customers, for whatever service your institution is rendering, feel safe to be with you, that will directly reflect on the business and its long-term sustainability. Uninterrupted provision of services. Imagine a telecom company, their services going down because they have not been able to put in place the right measures. Now, what happens is someone loses his business because he wanted to make a call and the call didn't go through at a certain time. He will just switch to the next available business. Okay. Now, I already talked about competitive advantage, but putting in place security now will ensure that you are able to continue with your business for a long time. How to do it, for me, is really important. And how to achieve this, I will put it simply: organizational culture. Wake up. Every person in the institution should wake up knowing what to do when something happens. Okay, so we are talking about embedding controls. We are talking about getting buy-in from both staff and customers. We are talking about continuous training and awareness, both to staff and to people, companies, institutions that are dealing with a particular entity. And if people know, well, Deloitte, I'm not that conversant with Deloitte's slogan, but MTN in Ghana, we say everywhere you go. You know, people get to associate with an institution because of certain things they know the institution for. And if security and stability, consistency, availability is something that the institution is known for, this will ensure that the institution continues to operate for a very long time. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. So our next panelist, Enrita, would like to know from you how regulations and legislations in Ghana have contributed to maturity of cybersecurity programs for organizations.
Sheriff, thank you again. I would say that regulations, as enforcement of regulations and legislations, has really have positive impact in terms of cyber maturity. I will give two instances, one for regulation and then one for legislation. In 2018, the central bank published the Cyber Information Security Directive for all financial institutions. This became operational in 2029, and financial institutions were given the directive is made up of comprehensive controls that financial institutions have to implement. And the timelines for the implementation were between 6 to 36 months. Now, around that time, before the directive became operational, I attended a particular conference, and from the statistics that were shared, realized that a few, under 10 banks are compliant with information security framework or have implemented framework aside from those who are managing or storing cards, which is the PCI DSS framework. Now, at the end of 2021, I can say and attest to the fact that almost all the financial institutions have implemented the controls, which ranges from governance, network security, human security, physical security, cyber response, cyber defense, and also injecting security controls when it comes to security software development cycle, as well as cloud security. So, and that's in the case of legislation. So most of all the banks have worked hard to be able to achieve, and this has direct impact on the maturity level of cybersecurity. Now, when you come to legislation, now in 2022, the Cybersecurity Act 1038 was passed. And then in the following year, Cybersecurity Authority came out with the Critical Information Infrastructure Directive that banks have to, not only banks, but organizations that have critical information infrastructure have to implement and ensure that their critical infrastructures are well protected. And this is also another legislation that institutions are implementing to strengthen their cybersecurity space. So I will say that legislation and then regulations have direct impact on organizations' maturity level. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your submission. So we'll go to Kojo. Kojo, we would like to know from you the key stakeholders in building a cybersecurity or matured cybersecurity program. If you can help us know who those key stakeholders are.
Okay, so when it comes to security, as other panelists have said, it's something that wherever you are in the organization, you have a role to play. So at the highest level, you need to look at your stakeholders. If you are somewhere mid-tier or management, you need to ask, who are my key stakeholders? And your peers, you need to really do that exercise. It's not enough for just it to be done by a board or management team. You need to, wherever you are, take a look at that. And usually, most of the best practices, standards, ways that we are measured, be it looking at Ghana's national cybersecurity strategy, looking at International Telecoms Union, they are the UN agency in charge of, well, they look at ICT, they do look at security. They have a standard on cyber defense centers, and even they look at the stakeholders. If you look at how Ghana has, I think in the Deloitte presentation, they said we are now in top 3. The main thing is cooperation. So you need to look internally and externally. So if you are in an organization, if you're at management level, the other directors or deputy heads or heads, they are your stakeholders. You need to look up as well. Who is supervising you? Are you going all the way to the board? You need to look at those who are working for you or providing you a service. So the supply chain is important. So you need to look 360, get them out. Those who've done either business continuity, information security management systems, risk management, usually the consultants or experts will come and look at your stakeholders, and for each, try to see what they are giving you and what you are giving them, And so if you do that exercise, you would know, at least start to identify them. But the regulators are important. So you need to be familiar with your business and what regulations apply. Your customers are very important, because if you do the wrong thing, and it eventually will come out. It's like pregnancy, you can't hide it forever, right? And you also can use your knowledge to try and see people who can give you feedback as to your direction, because if you're clearing a path, you don't know whether it's crooked or straight. So for me, I do that exercise, and I would encourage you all to do that. Business, regulatory, internal, external, even international if necessary, especially if you are part of some memberships and associations. So all of that will give you a 360 view, and you can prioritize so you don't get overwhelmed. You can pick out and you know how to work. But the regulators are important, as are your customers and people you work with within the organization. Thank you.
Great, great, great. Thank you very much. So our last question for the second round goes to Temitope. So Tope, we would like to know what you consider to be the major cybersecurity trends in Africa this year, 2023.
Yeah, thank you very much. So for trends, I've picked them, listening to other speakers, and I'll just outline them and react with them maybe in a very linear format. The first I've seen was also in your presentation where you were talking about the survey, Sheriff. Yes. I've seen board's interest in cybersecurity. It's now strategy-led, whereby the board is interested. We have a business strategy, and that gives birth to our IT strategy, and from there it flows to our cyber strategy. In fact, yesterday I was in a board meeting for a bank across Africa, and we're discussing cyber for 4 hours. 4 hours. That would not happen years ago. We were looking at the bank and discussing their issues, and we're talking with the board members. So this is something that I've seen is taking the front burner right now. So if your company is still not thinking about it or talking about it at the board level, I think you are really far behind. So that's one of the trends that we are noticing. We're also noticing the issue of immigration. I think Samuel talked about it. You have this cybersecurity. There is a gap of over 3.5 million, skills right now. As in job vacancies in cyber is about 5 million globally. So the few skills that are available, they are serious hotcakes, and many of them are leaving the region and going abroad. As we speak, Deloitte, I'm sure you are aware of this, Sheriff, that there are about two banks in West Africa that we are now their cybersecurity team and CISO. So because everybody left and they had to fill in the gap. So we are now the team members as well as the chief information security officer. That's really profound for banks, not for a small organization. And so we've seen that issue whereby there's that immigration, and the good thing that we are always available to support clients, in those short period. Then AI as well, artificial intelligence. Although many times so many things is just noise, people just talk about AI, but it's also something we're going to see being built into capabilities. In terms of trends, I think ransomware, social engineering are the two biggest that I'm seeing. For ransomware, in those days, FSI, like you mentioned, in Ghana, Nigeria, the financial services industry are more advanced when it comes to cybersecurity because of regulation. And also, they are the most targeted. Research shows that they are 600% times more targeted than other industries. Now, because of that, we have a show whereby the guys in the financial services space, they put a lot of measures in place to protect themselves. Then the others are saying, well, we don't have money that you can take from us. We are okay. We are not banks. You can't steal any money from us. But right now, with ransomware, everyone is a target. People can target any company and say, come and pay a ransom, lock down the entire system. And this has made everybody to sit up. So ransomware is being heightened. We saw what happened to Bank of Africa that was published just a few weeks ago. And we saw what happened to Bet Nigeria, several other organizations, and social engineering is using various means to exploiting the human aspect of cybersecurity. We always say that people are the weakest link. And even when you get your systems very tight, sometimes just deceiving somebody can just expose the entire system. So these are some of the trends and threats that we are noticing across Africa. And your survey has already touched on it. And just to wrap up, I would say that we should always keep abreast of this. Stop thinking that it cannot happen to me, and stop saying the God forbid that we normally say in Africa, God forbid. Prepare, and prepare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tope. So at this point in time, I'll thank our panelists for the conversation so far. It's been very insightful. So we'll move straight into the Q&A session. We're going to take 2 questions. We've seen 2 in there. I'll read them out, and whoever would like to respond to any of those questions can let me know, then provide the response. So this is from Mohammed Silla. He says, in light of the myriad disciplines and vendors in cybersecurity space, what starting point can you recommend for organizations in developing cybersecurity policy? So this is Mohammed's question. If I may repeat, in light of the myriad disciplines and vendors in cybersecurity space, what starting point can you recommend for organizations in developing cybersecurity policy?
Okay, I can start. Others can chip in. I would say talk to Deloitte. Now that was a joke, but that's also a good joke. I would say start with having a cybersecurity strategy. If you don't have a strategy, you'll be inundated by the news and by vendors. Every time you just listen to the news and you're hearing something terrible has happened, you start having high blood pressure. Or vendors are selling their tools and they will use fear, uncertainty, and doubts to tell you how if you don't buy their tool, you are dead the next day. And people are worried. But every company is different. Your threat landscape is different. What you are susceptible to is different. What you're trying to achieve is different. So first of all, what is your cybersecurity strategy as a business? And that starts from what Daniel said earlier on. Every business needs to know what is your business imperative. What are you trying to achieve as a business? Based on that, you now look at what are the technology implementations or platforms you need to have to enable your business strategy. And based on that, you now say, based on the business strategy and the IT strategy, what is the cybersecurity strategy? Where are we going to? What are we trying to protect for our own organization? What kind of risk are we faced with in our own organization? So once you begin to do that, then you cannot create policies that are peculiar to you. So that I can't copy policy from another place. There's a particular, I have the privilege of working with an organization, and I've seen the policy of one company in another company. They just changed the name. Somebody moved there and moved the policy. So that's what's happening. People are just copying here and there, but your company is different. So know your company, know your business, and based on that, define your policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Tope, for that. Thank you. So there's a second question. This from an anonymous attendee. He or she says, how can SMEs successfully implement and leverage on cybersecurity for business continuity, considering the cost involved in security implementation? I want to repeat. How can SMEs successfully implement and leverage on cybersecurity for business continuity, considering the cost involved in security implementation?
Can I answer to this?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Right. So that is a very important question in our environment, because there are many businesses, very many businesses that are too small to employ certain skills, and they indeed may not be able to pay. And our environment is very fast evolving, and there are companies and institutions. Tope has just mentioned that in Nigeria, Deloitte is the one providing full services for some banks in certain spaces, certain areas. Now, the same can be realized. You may not be able to hire a cybersecurity expert or you know, someone to sit in your company. So buy the service, engage a consultant, or come together and engage the services of a consultant. Together, you may be able to pay for the services of a highly qualified person to deliver superior services to you at a reasonable fee that any corporate and high value institution could get. Okay, now, you may be a small shop, let's say a small shop sitting somewhere in the corner of a city, but making good money and putting your earnings on an electronic platform. If you are in a situation like that, I would really urge that such an I'm assuming that this is the kind of this is the kind of company that the question is addressing. The Bank of Ghana has put together a SOC that banks or financial institutions can subscribe to, and these are the kind of companies that are coming up, and I would urge that such companies, such SMEs should look out for institutions like this. A lot of SMEs are now using digital platforms to operate, and these platforms need to be properly protected. SMEs, a lot of the SMEs also may not understand what it means to have a good strategy in place, to understand what their business is really about, and identify what the critical infrastructure or the crown jewels in their business. Get someone that understands it and let that person provide that service to you. Come together as a union or as a group of 10, 15, approach a company, and they'll be able to deliver services at a reasonable cost and provide top-notch services for such. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. At this point in time, we thank our panelists for this wonderful job you've done for us. Now we move into almost at the end of the engagement. Kofi will come in to give the closing remarks, but I want to also prompt our participants that in the chat box, the report that we presented, the URL or the link to that report is there. And also an evaluation form will be also put in the chat box, and please do well to complete that for us. So at this point in time, Kofi will give us the closing remarks, then we'll be done for this engagement. Hello, Kofi.
Thank you, Sheriff. Hello, can you hear me, Sheriff?
Yes, Kofi, audible.
All right. In fact, I don't even know how to close because I wish we still had more time to discuss. This has been a very interactive session, but as the saying goes, whatever has a beginning will have an end. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's presentation. I want to say a very big thank you to our distinguished attendees, and a special thank you to the Honorable Minister, who was ably represented by Stephen. I want to say thank you to our panelists, very good friends who have been very insightful in, discharging their responsibilities. And thank you to colleague partners, Samresh, Tokwe, for making out time. I know how busy you are, but we really want to appreciate you. And I want to say thank you to colleagues who have been working around the clock to make sure that today's program is a success, especially the guys behind the scene that nobody sees them. These guys have been wonderful, making sure that the planning and every other thing is spot on. So, ladies and gentlemen, we draw the curtain. We want to say thank you to you all, and we want to draw the curtain here. But please, always be on the lookout. Deloitte we have a lot of webinars planned for this year within the cybersecurity space, within the risk advisory space, and other areas. Thank you, and God bless you.